Hello, everyone. This is Nayiri from Low Carb and Fasting. Well, today's guest is board certified doctor. There is also a functional medicine doctor. He also holds a master's degree in biochemistry, and he can correct me on that if I'm wrong. Now, his specialty is hormones. Now, of the hundreds of topics I could talk to him, I could discuss with him today, I chose to focus today on women's health and specifically women's hormones. Well, he's one of his words is he's passionate about bringing women back to hormonal balance, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Dr. J. Wrigley, welcome to Low Carb and Fasting.
Welcome. I'm glad to be here and I'm excited and ready to go.
Dr. Wrigley, so you're passionate about bringing women back to hormonal balance. What hormones are usually out of balance when it comes to women?
Well, that's um, there's so many of them, but if we look at, my main specialty or wheelhouse is really probably in working with the transition from perimenopause into menopause. And this is the area of life where women begin usually in their early 40s to be make the first kind of hormonal landscape change. I use that terminology a lot, is because it's the landscape internally with the hormonal balance is changing in favor of the body not really wanting to reproduce anymore. It's really as simple as that. And there's nothing broken about this. It's not a disease or a dysfunction. It's just the way kind of the body carries out its natural process. And as the ovaries in a woman begin to get a little bit weaker in the early 40s, she stops producing as much of a particular hormone called progesterone. It will be the first one that begins to decline. And then later, estrogen will follow and testosterone will follow. And this can lead to complications with other hormones trying to step in to do the job of these ones that are declining, but they don't do it very well. So if you have an issue where cortisol levels from the adrenal glands are trying to make up for deficiency, cortisol can be a wonderful hormone in our body to keep us alive, but it also can be quite a problem if it's secreted over and over again, even at a low level. It's going to lead to problems with inflammation, and it's going to make it really, really difficult to lose weight, and can cause some problems with anxiety and some problems with sleeping well at night. And then there are the thyroid hormones that usually get involved in this transition from perimenopause through menopause, where the thyroid gland that sits in the base of your throat doesn't function as well as it once did. And that's all about your metabolism. So that's how well you get oxygen into your cells, that's how well you burn fat, mainly body fat for fuel, begins to get a little bit suppressed and the metabolism begins to run lower during this period of time. And because of that, two things will often happen. One is there's a whole set of signs and symptoms that women a lot of times will uh, come to me for, during that period of time. And it could be mood swings or insomnia or not enough energy or brain fog or water retention or, night sweats or hot flashes and all these types of things. Or they simply can be just the inability, they've insidiously gained a substantial amount of weight through this journey through perimenopause, and now they can't figure out the way to get it off because it doesn't work the way that it used to. It's the rules of the game have changed a little bit because of the hormone landscape changing, and what used to work well for a woman, whether it be just exercise more for a couple of weeks and cut back on some calories, she finds that no longer sufficiently gets any weight off of her at all. And it's because we have to kind of reformat what's going to work at this period of time, given the hormonal structure that's taking place within the body at that time, because each one of these hormones has something to do with your metabolic effect, and if they're off, then trying to to get where you want to go as far as leanness become real difficult if we don't address uh, these hormones and how to get them back into balance.
So, Dr. Wrigley,
That's a lot of that's a lot to say. That this is can be a very challenging time for a woman's life. Going into her early to mid 40s, all the way through her 50s, and into menopause. Can be a challenging time, or with the right education and sometimes the right coach, this can be pretty smooth, and it can be, a great kind of awakening time for a woman in her life, as to a whole new level of clarity and energy and creativity, as opposed to what often gets labeled as menopause, is kind of like, life's kind of not going to be fun anymore. It doesn't have to be that way at all.
So it's clear that from the thyroid hormones to cortisol, they're all playing a role here. As a type 1 diabetic for 46 years now, I know the role of insulin
Sure.
in metabolic health generally. And I also know of the link between cortisol and insulin. For example, even one, and I'm not talking about chronic cortisol, elevated cortisol levels like you were alluding to, but even one night of disrupted sleep for me will result in insulin resistance, temporary insulin resistance over the following 12 to 24 hours. Now, let's leave the insulin to one side. Now, I'm really interested in what the link is between cortisol and estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So what causes cortisol to rise when these three hormones decline?
Okay. Many things. If there were one answer, this would be really easy. But let's start with the most simplistic of. So you have, again, if we go through some of, let's lay down some of the the easy biochemistry of female hormonal chemistry as best we can. So let's start with that your body manufactures cholesterol in your liver. Now, it also takes a certain percentage of cholesterol from your diet, about 20%. But about 80% of the cholesterol that's manufactured and used by the body is made so in the liver. And that cholesterol is then used and shunted and repackaged and formed into what we call a precursor hormone called pregnenolone. Now, pregnenolone is what we call the master hormone, because from pregnenolone, you can make all of your steroid hormones. So estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, cortisol. These are the big ones, the big players here. These are all made from this basic material called pregnenolone. Now, to get to what you were talking about, as progesterone levels begin to fall in the early 40s, and estrogen levels have not dropped yet, they're still kind of up there. This is why a lot of women get themselves in a precarious condition called estrogen dominance, where there's too much estrogen around because there's not enough progesterone to antagonize that estrogen. So it leaves the body in a state of what we call estrogen dominance, and that can begin to affect a number of different things. We'll get into that just down the road a little bit. But where we were going was, okay, so internally, your body views this hormonal change as a stress. It's a hormetic stress, meaning it's a stress that if the body has everything that it needs and it's being fed the way that it needs to, and it's sleeping the way it needs to or whatnot, this stress of this hormonal change doesn't cause a whole lot of problems. But if there's other added stresses to that, just to, beyond the the hormonal change, there's, family life stress, there's financial stress, there's, work stress, there's, you add any other stressors on here. And the body's natural response to stress to keep everything in balance is going to be this production of cortisol. Now, it just so happens that cortisol is made from progesterone. So what happens is the pregnenolone we talked about earlier that's made from cholesterol then gets made into progesterone. And then if the body needs cortisol, it's going to take progesterone and it's going to manufacture cortisol out of that progesterone. So this already low level of progesterone that's becoming more and more deficient, now your body is robbing the little bit that you do have in order to shunt it down the cortisol pathway. So this is opening up that estrogen dominant ratio even further and further. So now we're looking at a progesterone deficiency with a somewhat moderate level elevated cortisol and plenty of estrogen around. Well, this is the perfect storm for the thyroid problem because the estrogen dominance is going to cause the body to produce too much of this hormone called thyroid globulin hormone. This is the hormone that binds to your thyroid hormones. And when it does that, they become inactive. So you can have plenty of, say, T3 and T4 floating around in your body. But if you've got too much of this thyroid binding globulin binding up all of that hormone, it's not getting into the receptors, into the cells of your body, to these little things called the mitochondria, where it is opening them up for respiration and letting oxygen burn fat and producing more of what we call ATP, which is the kind of the currency of energy in our body. Is you want to have a bunch of this ATP around. That's all manufactured through the mitochondria based on the thyroid's ability to get inside the cell and tell the mitochondria what to do. So that's a picture I would see on a daily basis of a woman who's going through declining progesterone, but she's stressed. So she's robbing the little bit of progesterone. She does have to make cortisol. Cortisol is an inflammatory hormone. It starts out as an anti-inflammatory hormone, actually, in a crisis situation. But little repeated bouts of cortisol being shunted into the blood every day become a very inflammatory thing. And this begins to throw up blood sugar levels. This begins to provoke areas where there's already inflammation. So if you were having challenges with either joint pain or you unfortunately are having issues with some type of inflammatory bowel disease like a colitis, like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or something like that, these tend to get really aggravated in the presence of too much cortisol. Um, so now, in your specific case, I don't know about how much you want to get into that. There's the whole there's another mechanism by which cortisol for the type 1 diabetic, through the action of cortisol on both glucagon, which is another hormone, and its ability to cause the liver to deplete itself of any stored glycogen that you may have. Then you get these bouts of insulin and blood sugar kind of fluctuation that happen anytime that you get something that stimulate too much cortisol in your body. And then, like you said, you have to kind of like really pay attention to getting everything back into balance for the next couple of days so that, this doesn't stay to be a problematic thing where you've either got to increase your insulin dosages, or if that's the way that you're managing this, or whatnot. But so it's as any woman can see, and this goes true for males too. It's a little bit different, but you can see that the machine of the hormonal side of our biochemistry is so complex, and it drives. I mean, it drives everything. I mean, everything in your body really is built upon something needs something, and it's got to ask for help at a cellular level. And the way that it does that is it triggers a hormonal response, and that hormone's got to come to the cells and plug into the cell and tell that cell, kind of give it the encoding, the inscription of what to do. And so our hormones are really at the seat of the soul of the balance of our experience on a daily basis. If they're really good and working well with each other, people tend to be what they want to be. They tend to be happy, sleep well, fit. They have great energy. It's easy for them to stay lean. Um, they have great positive mood mindset. Things are just, life's going really well. Then you throw a wrench in there and get this chemistry out of balance a bit, and it doesn't look that way at all. It looks like I don't even remember who I am anymore. I don't know what mood I'm going to wake up, with tomorrow. I don't know when, if ever, this weight gain is going to stop. That just keeps coming on, even though I'm not even changing my eating habits or exercise patterns. And, I'm not sleeping well. And now I'm having issues with dry skin, and my libido has begun to go away completely. And I don't know what happened to that. So it can be a whole nother story. And that's that's kind of my passion and my wheelhouse, and what I've spent 29 years of my life really kind of getting an understanding of, is putting that puzzle back in balance. And sometimes we can do that as simply as through dietary changes. And sometimes we need, a little bit stronger targeted therapy than that. And we will use something like some specifically driven targeted nutritional supplementation to drive a certain pathway. That pathway might be using something like, a good example would be, two really fascinating botanical medicines that we use today are, one's called ashwagandha, the other one's called rhodiola. These are basically both found in Chinese medicine and in Ayurvedic medicine, and now in Western medicine, because they have such an affinity for to be able to calm the adrenals down from producing too much cortisol. So if we need to target some glands or things like that and do that through nutritional supplementation, or help the liver clear out excess estrogen, and we might do that with something called diindolyl methane, which we just simply call DIM. This is a phytonutrient that comes from basically cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cabbage and things like that. And when it's taken into the body, it's converted from something called indole 3 carbinol to this DIM I'm talking about. And then DIM has a wonderful affinity for being able to get a woman's estrogen in really good balance, clear out any excess estrogen that she doesn't need, make sure that the estrogen that she does have is working better than it used to. And we, a lot of times, we'll use that for trying to correct something like the estrogen dominance we talked about. So anyway, what I was getting at is, the next stage of therapeutic is we might utilize some nutritional supplementation and like these things I'm talking about, maybe even some peptides and collagen and things like that. The third phase would be for a woman who's going through a particularly difficult time and really needs this kind of, she's about at at her wits' end of what's going to turn this around for her. Then we would probably have a conversation about something like the utilization of bioHRT. So bioHRT, for most women, I would imagine, know about that now. For anyone that does not, bioHRT is just kind of the name given to the replacement of a specific hormone in the female or male body that is in its truly identical state, meaning that it's the exact same hormone that as a woman, that your ovaries would have always produced all their life. So if we give them progesterone, we're giving them the exact same progesterone that their ovaries produce. Same with testosterone, same with estrogen, same with thyroid hormone. So in some cases, bioidentical HRT is it's a lifesaver. I mean, I'm a huge fan and believer in it because I've done all of my homework on this and found that that what started as kind of a throw it all out when we made a really bad decision back in the 30s and 40s and started playing around with synthesizing and trying to laboratory create estrogens for women. And we did that using basically horse urine. And we took that and we tried to create this into synthetic estrogen. And it became pretty much a nightmare. We began to see that there was a strong correlation between putting a woman on some type of equine horse related estrogen complex that was not natural in any way, but synthetically created. And, a huge shift and jump in things like reproductive cancers, like breast cancer and ovarian cancer. Yeah. Well, this was the exact opposite practice of using something like bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. But once that scare kind of got set in into the medical community and then certainly out into the public, they just basically pushed aside all hormones. We don't want to give any woman any hormone in menopause anymore because of really this bad event that really could have been solved by looking at the biochemistry and going, well, this is a completely different way of handling that with bioHRT. So, with all that being said, I am something I utilize in my practice quite a bit. I utilize it's not for every woman, especially a woman who chooses that I don't really want to do this because you don't have to. But as women begin to live longer and longer, and as they do, and now they are interested in not only an extended quality of life to go along with that quantity of life, but they're also looking for an edge for what are the things that we can, really do to slow down the clock, slow down the internal aging clock. What can we do around anti-aging and longevity medicine? Well, at the forefront of that really is to replenish any deficient hormonal pathways that you can do in a safe way and bring all of that youthfulness back into your body. So it can be used for a number of things. So I think I got off into a little bit of a tangent there, but these are just some of the ways that that we look at how we're going to address someone who might come to me for here are my issues. I need to lose 45 pounds. I don't sleep well at night. I don't have any energy. I feel like my bones and joints ache all the time. Um, got these terrible mood swings and headaches and things like that. And then I begin to take this case and through an interview process, an extensive interview process, and looking at any blood work that this patient may already have, or if I decide that there is some testing that I really feel like I need because something's being said to me that I haven't quite already figured out. Then I do all the gathering of information, and then I take that information and I build out a protocol for this person based on first and foremost, let's get you in hormonal balance. Number two, we're going to keep an eye on that bullet list we put together as our goals. So we want better energy. We want to lose significant fat. We want you to be a great sleeper. We want you to, not have mood swings anymore. We want your skin to look well, your hair to grow good, your fingernails to be strong and healthy or whatnot. And so whatever we need to do in order to put a protocol together that's going to include diet, exercise, maybe nutritional supplementation, and maybe a little bit of bioHRT. This is this person specific protocol, and it is very specific to that person. There isn't any. One of the problems I find on social media a lot of times is that people will go, "Well, what do you do about that?" When I put a tweet out or something, and it's like kind of to set myself up a little bit because what you do for that is very unique to your own bio individuality. It's not that, Miss Jones next door is not going to get the same answer by doing the same thing. So there's no cookie cutter protocol here for, if you've got this, then just go take these 3 vitamins or something, and all of that's going to clear up for you. So I do, I enjoy that kind of work of doing this on an individual basis, because I know that I'm building something here that is specifically for this person's biochemistry, and how to shift it in a direction that we want it to go in for the result of better health, more leanness, more energy, all that kind of. All right, so that was a lot of talking.
All of Dr. Wrigley's details will be below, by the way, so you can contact him via his website. Just check the description. Dr. Wrigley, you were talking about the type 1 diabetics. I mean, I have a large following from type 1 diabetics for obvious reasons. One of the things type 1 diabetic women between the ages of 45 and 50 that complain about is that I don't seem to have control over my blood sugars anymore. They're all over the place is the word I hear over and over again. They're all over the place. I can't predict what will happen. One day insulin seems to work, one day it doesn't work. How do you get through this? So can we talk about blood sugars? And I'm always interested, because obviously my community, we wear CGM. So it's very clear for us to see the blood sugar dysregulation. But for people who are not diabetic, they're not wearing the CGM. Are they also experiencing similar blood sugar dysregulations? Obviously within maybe a tighter range, perhaps a more tighter range than a type 1 diabetic.
Okay. Let's see how we want to start that. So for those who, well, I mean, I guess your audience would certainly know this, but if anybody needs any to lay down the foundation of type 1 diabetes, meaning the inability to produce insulin at all within the human body, as opposed to someone who's found themselves into a position where their body has built up a resistance to insulin. There's a big difference there. One is, as you've lived with this, and this is not to be taken lightly by any means. And you don't just take a type 1 diabetic and decide that you don't need insulin anymore. So now getting into the variations of what causes these roller coaster rides, it's strange. I mean, you would know this. You've been dealing with this for so long, but to try to help other people, there's so many factors in this, because certainly it does have to do with what you eat, but it also has to do with, again, what kind of hormonal balance are you in? Because what really affects our body by what we put in our mouth as far as diet is really the hormonal response to the food that we eat. So if you're pushing something like carbohydrate in a diet, whether you're diabetic or not, you're still trying to drive this mechanism of that you now need glucose, this carbohydrate that you just ate that has been broken down to glucose. You need to get this inside the cells of your body. Now, insulin is the driver of that mechanism. So if you have a really good insulin response and high insulin sensitivity, that works out pretty well for the most part. Until you do that for too long, and then you're going to probably end up being insulin resistant if you're just feeding yourself carbohydrate all the time. But with the type 1 diabetic, it's a little bit different in the fact that finding that perfect dosage of insulin that matches how much carbohydrate or not carbohydrate you ate is probably hard enough for you guys. Secondly, you have to get into the fact that every single food that we eat has an insulin response to it. People miss this all the time. They think that, oh no, only carbohydrates cause an insulin spike. No, protein can cause an insulin spike. Fat can even cause your insulin to go up. So you have to be aware of those two things, because I will get a lot of times from type 1 diabetics, or type 2 diabetics, but wanting to know, like, all I ate yesterday was, a couple of ribeye steaks with cooked in butter and, um, you know, some heavy cream in my coffee and, some things like this. And, I really saw my blood sugar kind of bounce around like I wouldn't have expected to because I didn't eat any carbohydrates. Well, you ate, 200 grams of protein when your body probably would have done well on about 120 grams of protein. So that extra 80 grams of protein elicited kind of this whole response in your body, this whole pathway called gluconeogenesis, where your body used this extra protein to make glucose out of, or whether it was going to use it for the brain at that period of time, or whether the protein can't be stored away. So you can't store protein. So every bit that you eat, your body's got to do something. It's either going to dump it through your kidneys and get rid of it. Sometimes that can be a little bit tough on the kidneys, or it's going to save it for a minute just to use it up, and it's going to stop any fat burning that you got going on, because it might shunt some of it to the brain, because the brain does use about 20% of its energy that the brain burns. It prefers to be in the glucose form as opposed to from ketones and other fats and things like that, which a whole nother subject. But there's such a good reason why when people who are having issues with needing brain energy and mental health or whatnot would want to eat, um, certainly closer to a ketogenic diet than any type of regular diet, because you want those ketones produced in your body for brain health and for, sharp thinking and clarity of mind and these types of things. All right. Well, I got off track. So anyway, what we were talking about was the fact that every food's going to have an insulin response. And so you can't just assume that I'm just trying to, regulate my CGM or my insulin injections, whatnot, to the carbohydrate in my diet and forget about that the protein and fat play a role here too. So, and that's probably what you found as well.
Oh, completely. I mean, I rarely eat carbohydrates that are under 20 grams per day.
Sure.
And I take insulin for all the protein that I eat. And I also take into account the fat content of the meal, because it will have that delayed effect of fat. Fat will not raise your blood sugar levels, but entering perimenopause, in fact, now that I'm 50, 51 next month, so the blood sugar, the erratic nature of blood sugar is what used to work when I was 45, just no longer suddenly was working. And it's probably is due to, does lower estrogen, when estrogen starts dipping?
So estrogen is a blood sugar. Estrogen lowers blood sugar.
Right.
So one of the reasons why women, without your particular condition, but if you were to just take a woman who's going through the through her mid 40s and is wondering why things like that, the PMS symptoms, but the week before her period, are getting worse and worse, and those are coming with uncontrollable cravings now, and sabotaging their diet, and it just kind of gets real ugly sometimes. A lot of that has to do with because when the progesterone levels drop too low and you're in that estrogen dominant state, estrogen is a blood sugar suppressor. So it is going to drive your blood sugar down, and your body's response to that is going to be something that to get that blood sugar back up. Now, it's going to utilize adrenal function first. It's going to go after cortisol. It's going to shunt. It's going to start producing a fair amount of another adrenal hormone called norepinephrine, or some kind called noradrenaline. These are very quick flight or fright response mechanisms in the body to take somebody from a hypoglycemic reaction of low blood sugar to get that balance back up. And so you've got these chemicals, there's hormonal chemicals now in your body trying to get their blood sugar back up that went too low because estrogen pushed it too down. And that's just another one of the complications, right? So you've had to live with, because you're already dealing with the type 1. And now you're going to also see that it also begins to get affected by where you are hormonally through peri and post menopause is going to be another contributing factor to why did one day your blood sugar do so well and your insulin levels were tracking really, really well and all of this stuff. And the next day, not so much. It goes beyond what it is that you just put in your mouth. It goes on, it goes, what's going on with estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, your thyroid. Did you produce too much cortisol from some kind of stressful event yesterday? It gets a little bit complicated for sure, but manageable because you're doing great with it. And it just takes some, you got to stay on top of it and learn how your body reacts to certain stressors and things, and till you get ahead of those and go, okay, I know that when I do this, this is going to happen. So I adjust either my insulin dose to that, or know that I'm not going to need as much insulin today because I'm in a perfect, relaxed state, and I know that I'm going to be eating primarily protein and fat all day long. Going to let you kind of get away with maybe on the lower side of the insulin that you need that day. Okay, where are we going from here?
So
You know what time? You know
yes,
what time it is?
it's 11:12 at the
Okay,
moment. So it's interesting that the so estrogen and insulin also kind of play kind of sync together, right? So it's very interesting because this
sure.
is probably what happens when people are estrogen dominant or women are estrogen dominant. They have lower blood sugars, and that's usually the period when people start a lower carbohydrate diet and they go,
Yeah,
it's working, it's beautiful, I love this,
yeah,
until it doesn't work anymore.
yeah.
It
Right.
certainly happened to me. I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't eat carbohydrates. I usually have good control over my blood sugars, but now it's not working anymore. The diet alone is not
Yeah,
working.
yeah.
So that's when estrogen levels start dipping. Now, when do women usually experience the horrible perimenopause symptoms? When do those symptoms come about? Like the night sweats, which I also
Yeah.
experienced, the hot flashes, the brain fog.
Right. Well, it'd be impossible to put a date, and that we can't, I guess if you had to try to spotlight light it, 47, 48 might be about the time where you're going to see the most disruption. But again, that's impossible to say because nowadays we see women who go through menopause at 39 years old. We also see women who hold menopause off and are still regularly cycling at 60 years old. So, these are just ballpark figures, but it's usually in the later part of the 40s, getting closer to 50 is when you're going to see that the perfect storm of, okay, we've been dealing with a progesterone deficiency for quite a while now. A lot of that's been robbed by cortisol. Estrogen's been doing okay, but now estrogen's on its way down. And why that gets so complicated and how it plays a role in both weight and blood sugar is that your body's never going to run out of estrogen because your estrogen gets stored in your fat cells. But here's why women have this issue with the diet that was working so well with for them, like you mentioned, and now it's not working anymore, is because in the beginning, your body is freely willing to give up body fat tissue for the energy that it provides for all of the different biochemical pathways that need to be driven for it. When your estrogen levels start to get low because you don't produce any more of it out of your ovarian and your adrenal tissue and even intrauterинely, um, then now what you're left with is all the estrogen that you have is stored inside your fat, and your body is going to say, I'm not giving it up. I'm not going to very easily give up that body fat because that's where our estrogen is. And when we need it, I know how to break a little bit of that open. But if you go clean me out, you go get real lean and dump all of the estrogen out of your fat cells. That's to the body. That's a fight or flight syndrome. That's like we'll fight about this, and so this is one of the things why the diet it's not really that hard. It's you get the mind frame to shift and go, okay, here's what's going on. Your body still will respond well to a low carbohydrate way of eating. Now, you'll also be able to, if done correctly, you'll also get more variety in your diet because what happens is you need to stay low carb. You need to increase the amount of protein in your diet than from a true low carb or ketogenic diet. You need to be eating a higher protein diet with your low carbohydrate diet. And what you want to do is you want to really moderate the fat in your diet. This is not, no longer are you going to be the woman who can get away with eating a ketogenic diet of 75 to 80% of fat in your diet all day long. It's not going to work that way anymore because now, with the decline of estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, which are all part of your metabolism, you are now perfectly designed as a fat storer. Your body's not easily giving up fat anymore. So to add a bunch of an additional fat into your diet is you're never going to burn through that before you get back to trying to burn some of your own body fat. So you've got to dial that back. And in no means are we talking about a low fat diet. We've seen what that did, that wrecked America for, 75 years. But it also doesn't need to be the what you see on the internet a lot with just cram your diet as full of fat as you can possibly eat, as long as you keep your carbohydrates really low. And there's a time and a place for that. If you got epilepsy, if you're a guy that's probably 28 years old and full of testosterone, that probably works out really well. But you take a perimenopause or a just entering menopausal woman and try to put them on that type of diet where you eat a low carbohydrate diet, you're also eating a fairly low protein diet, and you're eating a tons of fat in your diet, and you're the you know this is why I stay in business pretty much is because I get that woman's going to eventually come to me and go, what? This is supposed to work. I don't eat any carbs and I eat a high fat diet. And so my body's supposed to be making all these ketones and I'm supposed to be burning my own body fat like crazy. Yeah, you would have 15 years ago. But now the whole hormonal landscape has changed and you can't eat that way anymore. Now you need to prioritize protein for your satiety so that you can get that appetite under control. Dial back that fat a little bit. By the easiest way to do that is to, for the most part, just try to eat the fat that comes with the protein that you enjoy. So if you like fish has got plenty of fat in it. If you like eating New York strips or ribeye steaks, there's plenty of fat marbled into that piece of meat. It doesn't need any more fat with it. So don't go cook your protein foods that already have fat with them in more fat would be the rule one to get on top of this is just don't add a bunch of more fat for your food. Fine when you want to like saute vegetables or whatnot, you need a very small amount of a good high heat oil like an avocado oil, or you can even use some of the olive oils, some of the better ones if you can find them, or even coconut oil or something like that. But you need a very small amount of oil just to get your the vegetables going. And so then that way you can eat a low carb, higher protein, moderate fat diet, and you can be well back on your way to losing weight again, where you're just not going to lose it with the high fat keto diet. It's not going to work for you.
Okay, so when do we see what causes, which hormone is it that's causes? It's probably more complex than I'm assuming here. Is it the estrogen or is it the progesterone declining that causes disruption in the menstrual cycle?
Well, but I mean,
I've always been
Here's
interested.
here, yeah. Let me try to make this as easy as possible because I know a lot of women would love to know exactly what you're asking. And the truth be told, there you could not separate one from the other and say that one of these is more important for anything. They're that important to every bit of your life. However, there's a way that this works. When a woman begins to decline in progesterone far before her estrogen levels start dropping, what you're going to see there is that because estrogen is the initiator of blood flow. So what a woman will typically see in perimenopause is her um, uh, that her periods begin to get shorter and shorter. Like she's having them every 3 weeks now instead of every 4 weeks, and then now she's having them every 2 weeks. And then they might start bouncing around and going further apart again. They'll do a lot of different things, but the classic sign is that without enough progesterone to antagonize the estrogen, you're going to see more bleeding and you're going to see it more frequently. Now, when estrogen levels begin to decline, because estrogen is the initiation of your menstrual cycle, this is when you're going to start to see the opposite and the cessation of periods. So you're going to see first as estrogen levels drop, you're going to maybe go through that period of time where you have a menstrual cycle about every 3 or 4 months, or maybe a year, and then you might go 8 months without a menstrual cycle, and then you might never see a menstrual cycle again. As you move into full-blown menopause, you don't have enough estrogen anymore to even shed the lining of your uterus anymore. So in the beginnings, it'll look heavier, more frequent periods when progesterone drops. When you start beginning to decline and having periods and they get shorter and further apart and stop altogether, that's going to be the estrogen deficiency side of this. And that's usually what comes with the hot flashes and night sweat, is that going through that first part of the estrogen deficiency part of, as you're entering into the menopausal picture and you don't have enough estrogen around. Estrogen, in a very crude analogy that I will use sometimes just to get people to understand it, estrogen is kind of like the radiator fluid in your car. The reason that you have that in your car is so that your engine can burn at that high level of heat without destroying all of the components within the engine itself. So you've got this coolant that flows through the engine while the engine's running, and it keeps it cool. This is what estrogen does in the female body. It keeps the body cool, and it keeps the liver mainly cool, because the liver is the hottest organ system in the body, because it's where all the metabolic machinery is going on. And how you'll know this is because I'm sure you talk to hundreds of women, as I do every day, who um, one of their first questions is, why is it do I wake up between 1 and 3 o'clock every AM? Well, that's because that's when your liver is most active, and you take an already hot organ and you put it through what is its time frame. Especially when you're asleep, it goes into house cleaning mode, and it begins to try to clean up all of the daily activity, all the metabolites from all the biochemical pathways, anything you ate today that you shouldn't have eaten today, anything that you did to poison your blood that you shouldn't have done today. The liver is going to do that house cleaning work at around 1 to 3 a.m. And if it gets too hot, you can't sleep through that type of stuff. So you wake up, and sometimes you notice the heat, and your pajamas are soaking wet. That'll happen a lot for a lot of women. But other times they don't even notice the heat symptoms. They just cannot stay asleep between 1 and 3. And that's because the liver's too busy, and it's too busy to allow you to reach a deep level of sleep and to be able to sleep through that. So, looking at it from that perspective, what do you do about that? Well, we want to keep the liver cooler. How do we do that? Well, how are we going to get more estrogen utilization? Or can we do that through diet? Can we do that through supplementation do we need to put you on a little bit of small bioidentical estradiol or estriol, one of those two estrogens, to keep the liver cool, which is going to make you be able to sleep through the night and turn all the hot flashes off or whatnot. So you have to pick a strategy based on what the woman's comfortable with, what the doctor's comfortable with. But you're out to keep that liver cool during 1 and 3, or you're not going to be a good sleeper. Now it gets complicated because that's not the only thing that will disrupt sleep between 1 and 3. If your thyroid gland is not working very well, you're not going to sleep between 1 and 3. Now, part of that is liver related because the liver is what makes the conversion of when your thyroid gland makes its primary hormone called thyroxine, which is we just simply call T4. It has to be converted into what we call T3 because T3 is the active form, and that's the form that's going to go plug into the cells and tell them what to do and give you a better metabolism. Well, the conversion of T4 to T3 happens in the liver. So if the liver's disturbed, the liver's hot, it's not happy, it's not converting T4 to T3 very well. And then without the T3 being able to get into the cells, then you're going to find that that's another reason why between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't sleep very well at all. So I find this still to this day fascinating, and I find it even more fun to piece it together for a person who would not understand this, because who would understand this, even myself included, had I not, for various reasons, various mentors and various things led me down this pathway I would never thought I would have chosen for myself within the context of medicine to be, pretty much special in female hormonal biochemistry. But what I was getting at is it is very rewarding to put this puzzle back together for a woman and go, when we get your T4 converting to T3 accurately and into the cells of your body, and we take some of this heat out of the liver, you are going to find that your life looks like a whole new person. I mean, you're actually going to look different. You're going to look better. Your skin's going to be better. Your hair's going to be better. You're going to sleep at night. You're going to have good energy. You're going to be able to lose the weight that you haven't been able to lose for 10 years now. And it's a pretty special thing to watch somebody.
Two questions come to mind now. I mean, I know of insulin a lot more than I understand other hormones. Now we know that insulin fluctuates.
Yeah.
If you look at, a graph, and the body's, a non-diabetic body's sort of release of insulin, it's like a wave. And I know that, in fact, I've seen a graph showing estrogen, testosterone, all the other hormones fluctuate throughout the day. So if you are going to test someone's hormonal deficiencies, what kind of test is needed? Because at that particular moment in time, their graph might show a high estrogen and low testosterone, but then we don't know what's happening over the remaining 24 hours in that day. So
there's good and bad about that. The good news about that is that the hormones that we are talking about, the primary female hormones, they do not need to be monitored they bounce around from 1 hour to the next hour, and they're going to do that forever. And so it almost gets really confusing and I can see where a lot of docs get real puzzled by this, and I feel for them. And it's because they're chasing that number. They're chasing that estrogen number to try to get it into a normal reference range, and they test it, at this hour, and then they test it, later in the afternoon, and they're completely different or whatnot. Well, that's just the nature of hormones. And so one of the first things is we need less testing. We need more doctors who have learned this kind of stuff and can have a conversation with a woman about her day and pretty much pick up exactly what was going on with her estrogen at any given time during that day. Now that takes a long time. That's an art and a science, and I'm very grateful for it. But it keeps me away from this chasing these numbers that don't really have any significance. Like another one is testing estrogen or progesterone through blood is almost useless information because you're testing something that's already had to be bound by a protein, because if it's found in the blood, it's already traveling from one place to another place, so it's already been signaled and called upon. So you're getting, say, a progesterone level that's already been bound to either sex hormone binding globulin, or it could be albumin or one of the other proteins, but it's being bound by something else. And it gives you no reflection of how much reserve level of this do you have. It just tells you how much you have floating in your bloodstream right now. So when I see doctors making determinations of adjusting women's medicines like HRT and stuff like this based on a blood test of estrogen and progesterone that were run at 9 o'clock in the morning on some random Tuesday, um, not probably a great idea at all. Now, the other part of your question is this: do we have tools now, um, and will continue to have tools that will, give us insights into a whole new fascinating world about what we're talking about? Absolutely. And right now, the gold standard stands on what's called the Dutch test. So the Dutch test, for any woman who doesn't know about this is a test where they are able to mail you to your house a kit, and you basically take a urinary sample and you put it back in this vial and you mail it back to the lab. And they take it through a procedure of dehydrating all of the water out of that, mineralizing it, busting it up into, the nano pieces or whatnot. What they're able to do is they can test for just about every hormone they want to. They can test how much of the metabolite of that hormone you used up and kicked out of your kidneys that day. And there is a formulation to take that. There's a formula to plug that into that they do for you, that you don't have to do this, that will give you a very accurate level of how much of this hormone you actually have in your body. So if you wanted to look at all of your metabolites of estrogens, progesterones, pregnenolones, cortisols, all of this stuff, and get a map of exactly where you are in this hormonal part of your life, by far the Dutch test is the best way to do that. Now, as far as I know, insurance companies are not yet picking that up for the most part. So that's an out-of-pocket expense, and they tend to run somewhere between $500 and $600 US to do that test. So it's everybody doesn't have that money laying around, but yeah, it would be the go-to if you wanted the most bang for your buck and the most information about where you are hormonally, for sure.
Thank you for that. So my second question was about testing for thyroid deficiency, thyroid hormone deficiency.
Yep.
What do we need to test for?
Okay, so another one that's needs a little bit more clarification, and doctors need to do a better job at this, is we've spent too much time now utilizing this one simple test on a thyroid test called your TSH level. That stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. And what that supposedly is it tells us um, that if it's in a normal range, then your thyroid gland is functioning well across the board. And, as I say that, I want to it makes me laugh because it's so such a misrepresentation of all of the various factors of when we talked earlier about, are you converting T4 into T3? Is T3 getting into the cells? How much of the T3 that's getting into the cells is actually getting being uptake into the mitochondria and being utilized for ATP production, and how much of it is getting kicked back into a metabolite that we call reverse T3. And this gets really complicated. And I don't expect anybody out here to be trying to jot this down or memorize this. This is all for a point. And that point is when you go to a doctor and you get back a TSH level and it says 2.3, and your doctor says, that's pretty good. That's kind of right in the middle of the reference range label. Therefore, your thyroid gland's perfect. No needs to worry there. That does not mean that in any way, shape, or form. So if your doctor will not meet you in the middle and at least insist, and that you insist that I want a free T3 level included with my TSH level that you're going to run. I would also like, if you will do it for me, is I would like a T3 uptake to know how much of the T3 is getting into the cells of the body. And I would like a reverse T3, because the reverse T3 is a feedback loop where your body is taking active T3, turning it into a form that doesn't have any biological activity, and sending it back to the brain saying, we don't need any more T3. When, if you measure that, you a lot of times will see that the free T3 levels are extremely low, but the reverse T3 levels are on the high side. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. This is a poor quality of life for this woman. And her doctor's missing this because he's going just on the TSH level and going, well, that looks normal. And meanwhile, this woman is suffering from every hypothyroid symptom you can see, including rapid weight gain, can't sleep, her hair's dry and brittle, constipated, doesn't know who she is because of the mood swings and the water retention in her legs. And this is completely getting missed, and it's not fair. So when you go to your doctors, you tell them, I want more than a TSH. I at least want a free T3 level run. Feel free to run my free T4 levels. Feel free to run my T3 uptake and my reverse T3. Matter of fact, why don't you just go run the whole thyroid panel? Would be a really good idea. That way I would feel a whole lot better about it.
That's great to know. So, so which one is more common, the hyperthyroidism or the hypo when in menopausal women or perimenopausal women?
I would sort of say by far it would be hypo, the low side of functioning, so that because it's the slowing down of the metabolism and all that. Now, that being said, there's a strong case to be made for, we see a lot of women get diagnosed with something like Hashimoto's, in that category of peri menopause leading up to menopause. And for those of you who may not know what Hashimoto's is, this is a thyroid, this is an autoimmune thyroid disease where your body's immune system is beginning to attack your thyroid itself. And a lot of reasons for that. There's no specific one that you could tell anybody, oh, this is why in every case. But for some women, it's simply the overconsumption of the protein gluten that's found in grain, and certainly genetically modified grains, like mainly what's grown in America. It can be related to other problems with other hormonal balances, where too much cortisol, not enough estrogen and progesterone have led the immune system to start attacking healthy tissue. There are many different reasons, but this would be considered more in its earliest stages. You would consider this to be hyperthyroid. The thyroid gland is revving too much. You might be sweaty all the time and actually losing weight. But usually the way that this plays itself out, as does Graves' disease, which would be another autoimmune thyroid problem, is they will start in one fashion, like the Hashimoto's being hyperthyroid, and then the thyroid will burn itself out completely, and then you'll go straight into the hypothyroid. And at that point, you're going to need thyroid medicine for the rest of your life, because your thyroid tissue is pretty much useless and not going to be rejuvenated. In some cases, we see that, but it's not unlikely. It's unlikely. So the answer to the question is a lot more hypo or slow functioning thyroid throughout peri and menopause, but we do see a fair amount of the hyper side too.
So what's the answer to slow functioning thyroid?
I didn't get that question.
Medication? What's the answer? How do we solve the problem of slow functioning thyroid? Can we just address the diet and the nutritional supplements maybe? Or is
You
medication?
can, but if you've got something that's diagnosable, or when there are numbers that are enough out of a range somewhere, you're going to need. I would not really encourage any woman to try to let's take that down the Dr. Google road. You want a practitioner. You either want someone who, something like that can be easily consulted online. Does not even need to be, with it. This is the type of work that I do now. Do most of my consultations from all over the world, as opposed to being landlocked or in a clinic anymore, because I can do that type of work, and many other doctors can too. But you would want a consultant. You would want a physician to work through any type of hypothyroid that was actually showing up as low T3 or high reverse T3 or something like that, because it's going to take. There's a very good chance that for at least a short period of time, it's going to take some thyroid medicine. And when I mean thyroid medicine, I'm talking about something that would be completely natural and safe. We call it natural desiccated thyroid. We're not talking about. I have no interest anymore in my career putting people on things like synthetically derived thyroid hormones like Synthroid or levothyroxine or any of this stuff, but to use a really high quality bio HRT thyroid, like something that came from the thyroid of from sheep or lamb, or even porcine, which would be a pig form, or even bovine from beef, but to be able to use a natural thyroid support medicine for a period of time to get this straightened out, um, may well be what needs to be done, and that's a call that's got to be made by a physician, because you're going to need a prescription for it. So that type of thing.
We're going to wrap this up, Dr. Wrigley, but my
Yeah,
very last question is about the bio HRT, which some women need. But do you see women who do perfectly well with lifestyle changes and maybe herbals, and they don't really need the bio HRT?
absolutely.
Yes.
Bio HRT is, I think you just said it best. The easiest way is to say yes. I see that it is for the most part not necessary, because we're dealing with a natural process. This is the natural evolutionary process of the female body to go through a period of time where she is not setting herself up for childbearing anymore. And it does not in any way require hormone replacement therapy. So that being said, then what can you do to make any issues that you have with this better and not take bio HRT or something like that? Well, that's lifestyle. Take care of yourself. If you do the things that that you probably are on this podcast about, are looking for advantages in the way to eat a proper human diet, which we would consider to be a low carbohydrate diet with plenty of protein in it, and somehow, to some degree, moderate that fat so that you're not eating neither a high fat nor a low fat diet. Get some exercise, utilize sunshine whenever you possibly can. Um, Educate yourself about nutritional supplementation. I think that we live in a time and age now where supplementing nutrition is no longer, to me, even like a question or a good idea. You don't have, in America, we don't have any magnesium left in the dirt that we grow our food in. So for doctors to tell me that, oh, if you ate a proper diet, you would never need to take a supplement. We'll tell that to magnesium, because you can go eat the cleanest diet you ever wanted to, including organ meats and all these types of things, but there's no magnesium left. So there are some things, and I don't like to see women shotgun or take bunches of multi nutrients or anything like that. but do your own, due diligence, or work with a doctor who can at least tell you that, yeah, in your case, probably some magnesium, probably some D3 with K2 is a good idea for you. There might be one or two other based on your family history of either if you had cardiovascular disease in the family, your doctor might say in your case, taking a little bit more omega-3 oil than you're probably going to eat fish, because you're probably not going to eat fish 5 times a week, might be a really good idea for calming down inflammation and protecting your heart. So little things like that, eating well, getting exercise or whatnot, women can sail right through menopause without a problem. And for those unfortunate situations when that's not the case, then they've got the option of these so-called medicines that I will, when I talk about bio-HRT, which I consider them to be far more like plant related than medicine related, but they're getting better and cleaner all the time. So if it ever does come down to that point where, you need a short course of therapy of that, then you're always going to have better, healthier choices to stay informed and work with somebody that who knows what they're talking about.
Perfect. Again, a reminder, Dr. Wrigley's details will be below, so please don't hesitate to contact him to put your hormones into balance. Dr. Wrigley, thank you so much for the time today. I really
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much. I enjoyed this. This was really good. Thank you for the format you provided. It worked for me. You just kind of lobbed me, well, the kind of stuff that I talk about all day long and let me roll with it. That's probably easier for me than anything else. So thank you for how you did that and the chance to get to meet you and all of that. And stay in touch. Let's do that.
Will do. Thank you very much. Bye for now.